But did Pius XII also grant a Turkey Indult that allowed the U.S. Catholics to eat flesh meat the day after Thanksgiving, as it is often alleged? The answer is no. Beginning in 1931, the Holy See granted American bishops the faculty to dispense from the laws of fast and or abstinence on civil holidays. The bishops, however, rarely took advantage of it, and moreover, the faculty they received did not include the day after a civil holiday. And the closest thing that this person could find in the article, the quote is here. It says, a Turkey Indult in 1965, quote, Roman Catholics in the Archdiocese of New York will hear the announcement at tomorrow's Mass that on the Friday following Thanksgiving, they need not refrain from eating meat. The dispensation granted by each bishop with the power from the Vatican will probably be in effect in most American dioceses. So that's saying that the bishops had permission to dispense people, but not every bishop did. Less than a year later, so this is also important, and this is why the answer is kind of maybe. Less than a year later, the church would no longer require Friday abstinence under pain of sin except during Lent. Current canon law defines Friday as an obligatory day of penance, the standard form of which is abstinence from flesh meat. Other forms of penances, however, may be done instead. If then one wishes to enjoy turkey and cranberry sandwiches on Black Friday, one can, by doing some other form of penance besides abstinence. The 1931 Vatican letter concerning the civic holiday indult recommends making some offering, especially in favor of the poor. Now, before I move on to this article, I want to go over here real quick and look at the Turkey Indult. It is noted that the Turkey Indult, what is called the Turkey Indult, never actually existed. And actually, let me see, this article here was written by GREGORY DIPIPPO on the mythical Pius XII Thanksgiving Indult. Great article by Sharon Kabel. This is important. This article is very good if you want to hear the history of the Turkey Indult and the question here, because the only evidence that we found, that the person here found of the Turkey Indult, was a question box from Father Daniel Brennan. And the reader asked, I am wondering why a dispensation was not given for the Friday after Thanksgiving this year, or why one was given last year. Father Brennan responds, and this is a great response for anybody today who's wondering about a kind of like ecclesiastical laws. He says, if you would insist that there is a good cause for such dispensation because the Holy Father granted it in 1958, I would remind you that the Pope does not need a justifying reason to dispense from mere church law. And in granting the relaxation of the abstinence on the Friday after Thanksgiving in 1958, which proves that it did happen, he set no precedent but granted a particular favor for a particular year. This would seem to be the first documented instance. Okay, there it goes. So if you're watching, you can see the excerpt from the newspaper. So this is important. This article goes on to talk about the history of indults in America, which is very, very fascinating to see how indults started becoming more and more popular, and so people started getting more and more days where they had it really set the stage in the 50s and the time leading up to the 60s and the 70s to get rid of abstinence on Fridays altogether, and leading to it only being in Thanksgiving, which is what we have today. Okay, so I read to you all this excerpt from Father Brennan on the question box on Thanksgiving, so I'm going to skip that a little bit, and I'm going to go into this section, which I think is very interesting, on the history of indults in America. After I discovered the article, it seemed to be a simple matter of hunting things down. I searched the entire Catholic news articles, yada, yada, yada. Interesting, there are plenty of other mentions of dispensations from abstinence during the same year. Here are a few quick examples from 1958. All Connecticut dioceses were dispensed from abstinence on Memorial Day and July 4th. All dioceses in Pittsburgh were dispensed from abstinence on Memorial Day and 4th of July. Bishops of Sacramento dispensed all Catholic visitors to the California State Fair on the Fridays of August 29th and September 5th. John the 23rd granted dispensation from abstinence on December 26th, the day after Christmas. Regarding the existence of a specific indult for American Catholics made by the Pope in 1958, there's not a single corroborating reference. That's very interesting. The trend of holiday indults. An unexpected result of my research into this matter for the holidays, I gave a few non-Thanksgiving examples of abstinence on American holidays. A dispensation on February 12th for Lincoln's birthday in 1932. 1935, a dispensation on February 22nd, Washington's birthday. A dispensation for 5 civic holidays, including October 12th, Columbus Day in 1951. A papal dispensation for May 1st, Labor Day in many countries. In 1960, a dispensation for the November 11th, which is Veterans Day. Quote, I found no mention of dispensation granting for abstinence on the Friday after Thanksgiving until 1958. And there's a Q&A that says, are Catholics allowed to eat meat on the Friday after Thanksgiving? Answer, no. So there you go. Must have been a rumor, and there must be some truth to this. Otherwise, people wouldn't be asking the question at that time period and getting answers like that. Then following the 1958 indult in 1959, there were no papal or diocesan dispensation granted for the Friday after Thanksgiving. This tells us that the Turkey Indult of 1958 was an outlier. However, a trend started in 1960 of dioceses around the nation granting indults for the Friday after Thanksgiving. Here are a few examples, by no means comprehensive, to illustrate the point. The Diocese of Pittsburgh issued a Friday after Thanksgiving dispensation in 1960, 61, 62, and 64. I wonder why not in 63. I wonder what happened that year. Diocese of Connecticut issued Friday after Thanksgiving dispensation in 62 and 63. Diocese of Santa Rosa issued Friday from Thanksgiving dispensation in 1963. Diocese of Stockton on 1962. San Francisco did 1962, 1963. And here's an example of one. Diocese of Santa Rosa published, the most reverend bishop, by virtue of an apostolic indult, grants to the faithful of the diocese a dispensation for the obligation of abstinence on the Friday after Thanksgiving, November 29th. So there you go, 1963. Alongside these specific examples, there are even larger developments like the Canadian Bishops' Conference completely abolishing all Ember Day and Lenten fasting and abstinence in 1960. Holy moly, what happened in 1960 in Canada? That is very interesting. There's a whole article. Is this an article? Yikes. Catholic News Archive. Wow. Wow, that is absolutely wild. I'm going to have to look into this. I guess here's what it is. That is absolutely wild. The new regulation provides that the law of abstinence henceforth will apply only on all Fridays of the year, while the regulation for fast and abstinence. I need to read this article later because that's very fascinating. How did this happen? How did that happen that in 1960, all Ember Days and Lenten fasting and abstinence were abolished for a year? And anyways, let's finish up the article and then I will let y'all go. Summary and final wrinkle. Based on the 1959 Q&A exchange in Pittsburgh Catholic, it seems reasonable to think that the Turkey Indult was granted by the Pope for Americans in 1958. However, it was just once, in 1958. It was not repeated on a papal level, and it's still bewildering that no official record has yet been found during the year of 1958 itself. And although the papal indult was not repeated, we can see the 1958 Turkey Indult appear to be a tipping point, after which a trend of frequent and repeated dispensations are granted both for Thanksgiving and for many other civic holidays across America, right up to 1966, when the American bishops removed the obligation altogether. Can it be any wonder there have been decades of confusion and rumors about abstinence and dispensations on the Friday after Thanksgiving? One final note of interest, you may have noticed the article from 1959 did not mention the name of the Pope who granted the indult in 1958. He is merely referred to as the Holy Father. Pope Pius XII died on October 9th, 1958, and Pope John XXIII took the throne less than 20 days later on October 28th, 1958. The Thanksgiving that year fell on November 28th. Until a future researcher finds conclusive proof of the announcement itself in 1958, can we really even truly assume it was in fact Pius XII who granted the long-rumored papal Turkey Indult after all? Or could there be one more final wrinkle awaiting in this mysterious saga? Okay, that's the whole thing. If you want to check out the article, which I highly recommend you check it out because there's a lot of links here that were citing other things that you can read and look forward to find out more information. That's the New Liturgical Movement. .com, newliturgicalmovement.org, newliturgicalmovement.org. And if you look up Thanksgiving, there are tons of articles they have on Thanksgiving, so you can check that out for yourself if you're interested at all in that topic on a current penance rules. And this is important. This is probably the most important part because this is the answer to, are we as Catholics in 2021 allowed to eat meat on the Friday after Thanksgiving. And I'm going to read to you what they said here. This seems to be a fitting moment to mention that the existence or non-existence of this legendary turkey indult does not have any impact on the current obligations in place for Catholics in the U.S. And the current 1983 Code of Canon Law clearly states that the Universal Church, quote, abstinence from meat or from some other food as determined by the Episcopal Conference is to be observed on all Fridays unless its solemnity should fall on a Friday. However, so right there, the 1983 Code of Canon Law says every person is to observe abstinence from meat or from some other food as determined by the Episcopal Conference on all Fridays. That's important to note. Every Catholic is bound to do this. Abstain from meat on Fridays. That's what it says there. It's a little bit more nuanced, and I'm going to get to that. But essentially, yes, we are still obliged to abstain from meat on Fridays. However, the current code also allows the National Episcopal Conference to, quote, substitute other forms of penances, especially works of charity, exercises of piety, in whole or in part, for abstinence and fast. In the United States, the Episcopal Conference issued a document in 1966 stating, quote, Friday should be in each week something of what Lent is in the entire year. For this reason, we urge all to prepare for that weekly Easter that comes with each Sunday by freely making of every Friday a day of self-denial and mortification and prayerful remembrance of the passion of Jesus Christ. Among the works of voluntary self-denial and personal penance, which we especially commend to our people for the future observance of Friday, even though we hereby terminate the traditional law of abstinence binding under pain of sin as the sole prescribed means of observing Friday, except during Lent. We give first place to abstinence from flesh meat. We do so in the hope that the Catholic community will ordinarily continue to abstain from meat by free choice, as formerly we did in obedience to church law, end quote. That is very idealistic, I would say, being charitable, and devious if I'm not being charitable, because he essentially said, yes, I think all Catholics should continue to abstain from meat on Fridays, but, we don't want to bind you by mortal sin. We're just going to say you're required to do it, you should desire to do it, but, if you don't do it, it's not a sin. Whenever you tell someone that, they're immediately going to think, okay, well, then I don't have to do it, and they don't do it. And that's why so many traditional Catholics do abstain from meat on Fridays, and so many people who want to follow these traditional practices just do it anyways, because they're doing it out of love of God, and they recognize, it's no sin if I don't do it otherwise, but I desire to. I desire to keep these fast. I desire to be Catholic like our fathers were before us. The article goes on, therefore, it is clear that while all Catholics should offer a fitting sacrifice each week on Friday and should view abstinence from meat as the ancient, fitting, and primary way to offer the sacrifice, it is no longer an obligation in the United States that binds under pain of sin. As an interesting aside, while most countries in the 1960s did indeed jettison the obligation to abstinence from meat, there is a clear trend of Catholics around the world desiring to return to traditional practice. In 2011, the Catholic bishops of England and Wales restored the traditional obligations to Friday abstinence under pain of sin. Oh, I did not know that. Go England and Wales. Praise be to God. Okay, so I know Poland also, you don't eat meat on Fridays. Okay, let's see. That's the rundown. There's your answer. So that means you have to make up your mind whether you want to eat meat on the Friday after Thanksgiving. It's up to you, as you're not committing a mortal sin. And if you want to still, follow the law, okay, well, eat meat and then do something else. Wake up early, go to mass bright and early in the morning, pray 4 rosaries that day, donate your money to a charitable cause, do something to make up for not eating meat or for eating meat that day.